So just waiting for this Facebook thing to get into action, and then we're ready to go. Oh, we are live. Excellent. Okay, we are live on Facebook. We are live in person, and we are live on Zoom. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. Thank Torah Anytime for hosting this as well. If you want to get lots of very, very good shiurim, you go to TorahAnytime.com. You can find tremendous amounts of great, great stuff. Here we got Iris coming back in. Okay, we're going to deal today specifically with there is a famous Rashi, one of the most famous Rashis, I think, that everybody knows about. Hi, sorry. There's a famous Rashi that we're going to deal with, and the pasuk says the following: right at the beginning of the Pasha of Noach, we say, "Eile told us Noach." These are either the children or these are the happenings that happened to Noach. And then right away, as we describe Noach, we say, Noach ish tzaddik. Noach was a man who was a tzaddik, a righteous person. Tomim wholesome haya b'derei, so he was in his generations. Eser Elokim hisalach Noach. With God, or together with God, Noach walked. That's how we start off the Parsha of Noach. And then we say Noach has 3 children, Shem, Cham, and Yafes, and the world has become entirely corrupted, etc., etc. So why do we have to say that Noach was a tzaddik tamim b'darosav? Why did we have to tell you that Noach was a righteous person, but a righteous person in his generations? What we really should be saying to you is Noach was a righteous person, period. Why are we mentioning his generations? So Rashi right away tells us, Yesh there are those that say this is a positive message that's being given in. And some say, no, this is a very negative message that's being given. So, number one, if you go say the Shvachi say Koshkin, if he was in a generation with more righteous people, he would have been greater as well. Noach was what he was because of the generation he lived in. And had he lived in a greater generation, then Noach would have himself also been a greater person. The Yeshua and some say it's the other way around. We look at it negatively. Lefi Dora Hayatzadik. According to his generation, he was a tzaddik. Yeah, he was a tzaddik in that generation, right? But had he been in the generation of Avraham, he wouldn't have been considered anything. Nobody would look at him. Nobody would give him a second glance. Who's that? No, all right, just another medium level tzaddik. So it seems to be 2 very, very different opinions over here about tzaddik b'dorosav, whether he was a righteous person in his generation. Was he actually a righteous person and he could have been even greater? Or was he a righteous person because everybody around him was so bad? Yeah. Remember that? Have you ever heard this one? I've seen this many times on cards. If you want to look thin, surround yourself with fat friends. Yeah, that's one way of looking thin. You put yourself on a picture with fat people, and everyone's like, "Who's the thin guy in the middle?" It's like me. It's not that you're so thin, but everybody else around you looks so chubby and so heavy. So the first thing that I will say is that I saw brought in a few different svarim that actually the 2 opinions in Rashi are not disagreeing with each other. They're actually both correct. It is correct to say that Tzaddik Haya B'Darosa, that Noach was a righteous man in his generations, but had he been in a generation of more righteous people, he probably would have been more righteous. It is also correct to say, but in the generation of Avraham Avinu, he would not have been considered such a hotshot. Okay? So both of them seem to be true, and they don't seem to actually contradict each other. It just depends. So let's go through. Oh, here's Michael. Hi, Michael. Good evening. So let's go through a few ideas that I saw today about this tzaddik tamim haya b'darosav, that he was a righteous person in his generation, and try to understand that further. So first of all, the question that we need to ask is, and this is an important question, you have people that have a positive attitude and you have people that have a negative attitude. So to some people, how was the wedding? Oh, the wedding was amazing, it was brilliant. Was lovely, and the kala looked great, and even if the kala didn't look so great, you'll still say the kala looked great, and the chassan looked really handsome, and the music was excellent, and the food was good, etc., etc. You ask another person, and they'll tell you about the same wedding. Oh, the kala's dress made her look like a tub, and the chassan, His suit was this ridiculous checkered thing. And what were they thinking with these big flowers that they put on their lapels? And the photographer was all over the place and constantly in your face and snapping away, and you couldn't see anything because there was flash coming out of your face the whole time. And the food was cold, and the music was too loud, and they took a terrible band. I'm sure some of you met people like that. So you have positive people and you have negative people. And according to the way that they are disposed, the way they talk, they will also talk about almost anything else. If you have a positive person, this positive person usually is very positive about almost anything that he speaks about. Because people that have a positive attitude usually end up getting positive messages from them. And people with a negative attitude, you get a negative message from them. But the question is, if the Torah, if the Torah has the ability to look at this word, it says he was a righteous person in his generations. And we can translate that word in one of two ways. We could either say he was a righteous man in his generations, but in other generations he would have been a nothing and a nobody. Or we could say that he was a righteous man in his generations, and in other generations he would have been far greater. Well, why would the Torah seek to give it a negative explanation when we could give it a positive spin? I think that's a very good question. Why are we looking to besmirch Noach? That's the question. And so I'd like to, Malcolm's not here yet, I think, if you're looking. I'd like to give you the following answer. This is an interesting answer that's given by Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky in his Sefer Emes LeYaakov, and I think it's a very telling answer. And that is, every generation, let's start with the following, every generation struggles with different things. And therefore, if you want to help that generation with their struggles, you need to learn about their struggles and you need to address their struggles. Okay? So, for example, I think it's true to say that years ago, people sought the truth much more than they seek it nowadays. People are not looking for the truth so much nowadays. You know what people are looking for? Good time. Right? To feel good and to have a good time. And sometimes you say to people, but it's not really true. And they'll be like, all right, but it feels right. They're not looking for the intellectual. And therefore, let's say, if I were to go bring in people from shul, and I have somebody who's not that observant, and I were to speak to that individual, and I said to him, you know, you're not really that observant. I wondered if there's anything we can do that would convince you to take on more things. He goes, well, Rabbi, I don't really believe a lot of this stuff. He says, well, why not? He says, well, it all doesn't make sense. I said, okay, let's have a discussion. Let's have a debate. We'll discuss it, and then we'll get there. So we sit down and we debate it. And he says, well, I'm not really sure there is a God. And you sit and you bring him the proofs, in inverted commas, of God, because there's no absolute proof. Otherwise, there cannot be any bechira, there cannot be any free will. If there was an absolute proof to God, where at one point or another you'd say, well, this is 100% proven beyond the shadow of a doubt, then there would be no free will under whatsoever. You can prove beyond reasonable doubt that God exists, but you cannot prove God beyond any shadow of a doubt, because then you're left without any free will. And there has to be room for the free will for someone to say, well, I don't believe in God. Okay? So you can bring them philosophical proofs and you can tell them, does it make sense? And you can show them maybe scientific evidence, whatever it is you want to show them. And you come to the end and you say to them, is that a good proof? He says, yeah, you know what? Can't argue with that. I remember I had a fellow in Whitefield Kollel that I had a discussion with about God. And he came in and he sat down. And I'm like, no, so what did you come here for? He goes, I don't really know why I came. I'm like, you must have you must have something you want to know. You don't just come to the Kollel because you're not such a religious guy. So what is it? He goes, well, finally got it out. He's like, don't really believe in God. So I started discussing it with him. I was much younger at the time. It was probably 12 years ago or something. I started discussing it with him, and we were going back and forth, and he was saying, I don't believe in this, and I said, yes, and back and forth, and finally at one point I had 5 minutes left, and he was really getting on my nerves, and I finally threw something at him, and I said, well, it is because X, Y, Z, this, and this. And I finished. And I said, now we have to dive a marav, I'm going to stop. And he looks at me and goes, there must be a mistake in that logic. I said, well, tell me what the mistake is. He can't just say there must be a mistake there and not point at the mistake. He goes, no, there has to be an error there. I said, I'll tell you what, come next week and you can tell me what the mistake is. I got to daven ma'ariv now. But you saw that I even was able to give him an argument where he didn't have a reply. And by the way, he did come back the next week. But I gave him an argument where he had no reply to it. And yet what happened? Did he become religious from it? No. And if I can prove to someone, people used to say, if you can prove to someone that God exists, that the Torah came from Sinai, that God gave the Torah at Sinai, and that the oral tradition is accurate and correct, well then everybody's going to become a frum Jew. Because what else are you going to do? It becomes almost impossible not to believe. How you get around it? Guess what? You can sit down with people and you can prove to them reasonably that there is a God beyond the shadow of it, beyond reasonable doubt, and that the Torah was given to us at Mount Sinai, and that the tradition as it's passed down is still accurate. And they said to someone, so are you going to start taking on Judaism? It's not really for me. And you're like, but it's true. Yeah. And I've proven it to you. I've shown you, well, I can't say again conclusive proof, but I've shown you the proof that I have. You've agreed with what I've said, and yet you're not willing to take it on. How does that make sense? And you know what they'll say? It just doesn't suit me. Or too much hard work? Okay, fine. I get that. I can understand that. I'm not saying Judaism isn't hard work. It is hard work. Let's try this. Does this work? Yeah. This works better. I'm not saying it's not hard work. It is hard work. Judaism is hard work. Being a frum Jew is a hard job. Waking up every morning on time to say Kriya Shema and never having, you can never say to yourself, I'm lying in till 12 o'clock today. No matter what. You're in the middle of holiday, you got to wake up in the morning and you got to daven. And you got to daven mincha no matter how inconvenient it is during your business meeting. And you have to find time for ma'ariv no matter which party or cocktail party you're at. You're going to, and you cannot go and say, you know what, I'm traveling wherever I want to. I often looked at non-Jews and I said, look how easy it is for them to travel. They just pack a bag and go anywhere. What do they do about food? They don't even think about it. What do they do about minyan? They don't have to think about it. What do they do about, they take one suitcase with 2 t-shirts and 2 shorts and off they go. Jews are like, where am I going to bring my tefillin, and how am I going to do for Shabbos, and where's it going to be my minyan, and what I'm going to do for food. It's an all-encompassing system. So for people, why are people not interested? Because it doesn't suit them. Not because it's not necessarily true. It just doesn't suit their lifestyle. And they're not interested in changing their lifestyle. So that even if you can... Now, there are people, that's not to say that there aren't people who, if you were to go ahead and you were to prove it to them philosophically, they would change their life. There are people like that. But I think that those people are few and far in between. In general, people don't change their life because of philosophy. They don't change their life to fit some kind of logic that they've heard. It's what suits them or doesn't suit them. And they don't see the pluses. Well, why should I do it? Why should I do that? Why should I want to get up in the morning to daven? Can't think of anything worse, right? There are people that will tell you that. And so therefore, if I were to approach people and I were to say to people, let's say, I want to get somebody to become more observant. And I approach them and I say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to discuss God philosophically. And we're going to discuss the giving of the Torah and the tradition. And, people will be like, whatever. Yeah. Thank you. You know what's become very, very popular at Seed? Even more popular than they used to have what was called I think it was Project Sinai or something. They had a Shabbaton that, where they used to go through all the different things about religion. They now do a lot of parenting Shabbatons because they've now decided to focus on parents with children and on young families and giving them tools, and these families walk away and say, you know what, Judaism has what to offer me because it's going to give me the tools to raise my children at a different level, to give my children tools for life, of honesty, of integrity, of morals. That's a beautiful thing. People buy into that a lot more than if I were to force you to trust me that God does exist, because everybody wants a children. And then suddenly becomes attractive. And so that you see that at one point or another, you have to go ahead and you have to change the focus that you have. How you approach people, how you speak to people, what you tell them in order to get them to want to buy into what you're doing. And so if I want people to come to a shir, if I say it's chumash, you know what I mean? Not so exciting. If it's tools for life, whole different story. I remember when Miriam was advertising her shir, and hopefully Mitzvah Miriam's going to be starting to give a shir again for the ladies. I'm just not sure yet when. But when Miriam was advertising her shir, what happened was that people said to her, somebody who's good person within the shul, somebody who really has her finger on the pulse, said to my wife, she said, listen, don't advertise it as a shir. Why? Because nobody wants to come to a shir. It's a talk, it's a discussion group. Call it something else. But don't call it a shir. Which is interesting, but that's how it is. Some people, they hear the word shir, they go, shir's for frummers, not for me. That's not for me. A discussion group. Oh, okay, maybe. Torah-based discussions or something like that, Tools for the modern woman. Oh, tools for the modern woman? Amazing. Shir on Chumash? Now you give the same shir. You can say exactly the same shir, but one if you call it tools for the modern woman, and one if you call it the shir on Parshas Bereshis. The tools for the modern woman, you might have 50 people coming, and the shir on Bereshis, you'll have 5 people coming, because people are like, oh, I don't want to hear about Bereshis. But if I show you in Bereshis that Bereshis gives you the tools how to be a modern woman, oh, that's clever, because I want to know how to be a modern woman. I don't want to know much about Bereshis. That's just the way it is. So therefore, says Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, you look at Noach, and Noach seems to be the single biggest kiruv, failure, disaster in the history of the world. Noach is building this ark for 120 years. And everybody's walking over to him. And everyone's saying to him, excuse me, sir, what are you doing? He says, what do you mean what am I doing? I'm building an ark. Yeah, it looks very big. It looks like a massive boat. It'll be a very big boat. And what are you going to do with that? God's going to bring a flood. Right. To quote Bill Cosby. Yeah. He says, and all the animals are going to come two and two and come inside this boat with me. Right. Imagine the story. If you had that and you watched this guy in some kind of shipbuilder's yard building this humongous, monstrous boat and telling everybody God's going to bring a flood and the entire world is going to go down in this flood, you would have thought the man has absolutely lost his marbles entirely. So now Noach but the question is, did Noach not have any effect on any single one person? 120 years of discussions, and not one person became frum because of Noach. Not one person changed around. He inspired absolutely nobody. Imagine if you had a rabbi like that. I think you'd get rid of him after 6 months to a year. If you had a rabbi that inspired nobody, you get, lots of rabbis have their detractors. But if the entire shul doesn't like the guy and everybody says this guy is like, his sermons are boring, he doesn't know how to daven, he doesn't know how to learn, he doesn't know how to do anything, okay, get rid of the guy. Yeah, this guy's going on for 120 years. Not one person buys into his philosophy. How did that happen? How does that happen? Says Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, an interesting idea. He says, you know what happened? Noach focused on the wrong thing. Noach was trying to convince people about God. And people came in, he said, sit down, let me tell you all about God. And he tells them his whole story and his spiel about God and about the flood and about the existence of God and the importance. And people are like, yeah, whatever. Why? Because it wasn't a question of belief or non-belief in God. I actually had somebody once say to me, and it was surprising to hear this, but the more I think about it, the less surprising it is. I actually had somebody once say the following words to me. Even if God appeared today to me in person and told me to keep the Torah, I'm not sure I would. That's what he said. Now you look at him and you go, oh, this guy's crazy. He's not. He's just very brutally honest. Because even if a lot of people don't keep the Torah, not because it's not true. It's just they don't want to. Yeah? And you might ask them, is this stuff true? Yeah, it might be true. Well, why don't you do it? It's just too inconvenient. And so Noach is dealing with an entire generation that is steeped in physicality, hedonism, whatever you want to call it. And therefore, they're very into all their comforts and everything. And Noah's going on banging his drum and saying, God exists, and I can prove to you that God exists. And I was like, okay, so prove it. Yeah, I proved it to you. Yes, you did. And therefore, I'm not changing my life because of that. And what you really need to do, and I think this is the truth of this is true even nowadays, is you need, especially nowadays, is what you need to prove to people is that living a Jewish life and living a more religious life will not detract from their pleasure. It will enhance their life. And if people say, oh, you're looking to enhance my life, I didn't realize. Okay, I'm always looking for life enhancing stuff. That's great. But if you say to someone, well, I'm not looking to enhance your life, I'm looking to impose all these restrictions. I love McDonald's. I love my restaurant, my favorite restaurant, East in the center of town. Well, you can't go there anymore. Why? Just because I said so. Yeah, no, not really interested. Why should I do that? That's not interesting. And therefore, Noach focused on the wrong thing. And because Noach focused his attention on the wrong thing, he never impressed anybody because everybody is too busy running after Olam Hazeh, running after this world, and running after the guilty pleasures to be willing to hear the truth that Noach has to give. And that's what we say, that's what's missing in Noach. Because a true tzaddik, so you say, it's interesting because Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky says, then that's not missing in his righteousness. That just means he wasn't a very astute fellow. Yeah? He didn't chap that he was doing the wrong thing. He didn't catch the fact that he was actually focusing his energies in the totally wrong direction. So why are we calling him Noach? Why are we saying that he's not such a great tzaddik? He is a great tzaddik. He's just not such a great mekarev. You know, sometimes you have somebody who's a great Talmid Chacham, he's just not a great pulpit rabbi. And sometimes you have a great pulpit rabbi who's not a great Talmid Chacham. You can have one without the other. Yeah? You can have a lot of these things. Noach is a great tzaddik, just not with the greatest seichel. So why are we saying he's not a tzaddik? So Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky says, which is interesting, he says, because a tzaddik's job is, and in general a person's job is, to dig down to the truth and to find the correct way of bringing it out and to bring it out to people. And if you didn't catch after 120 years that you're totally barking up the wrong tree, then you're not, then there's something missing and you're being a tzaddik. Because that means you're totally unfocused. A tzaddik is a man of extreme focus. And focus in his, belief in Hashem, focus in his trust in Hashem, focus in his Jewish life and his Jewish service to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. All that is tremendously focused. And you are not focused because you're all over the place and you don't get what's going on. That's what his problem is. So that's why Yaakov Kamenetsky says, Yesh dar shemos le'gnai. Let's move on to the next idea. The next idea was brought by Rabbi Yerucham. Rabbi Yerucham says that we are looking at we're looking at Noach, I'm getting ahead of myself. We're looking at Noach and saying, yes, Noach was a great man. But Noach was a great man in the generations, in his own generation. But in the generations of Avraham Avinu, he wouldn't have been as great. Give him a break. Give the man a break. It's not his generation. It's not Avraham Avinu's generation. We stuck here. Looks like we're stuck on the. I've had some issues today with my. Just quickly see if this springs to life. Maybe it will. Looks like, yeah. Sorry, the Zoom gets stuck a little bit because they're doing upgrading works on my network, so therefore my mobile coverage is not brilliant. Okay. So why are we looking at different generations? Why are we looking at Noach and saying, yes, Noach is a great guy? No, Sharon, I know that. It's fine on the Facebook it's fine. It's not great on the Zoom. That's what I meant. Thank you very much for clarifying that the Facebook's working. Thank you. Noach's a great guy in his own generations, but in the generations of Avraham Avinu, he wouldn't have been anything. Why are you comparing him? Leave the man alone. In his generation, he's a great guy. Yeah? So what Rabbi Yerucham says, which is a really important idea, is let me give you the following comparison. Okay? You have a guy sadly growing up in a council estate. And in that council estate, there's, he grew up quite poor, and there's not a lot of money, and sadly, things are very, very difficult. And he says, one day I'm going to get out of this place. One day things are going to change, and my life's going to change. Okay? And how's your life going to change? How so? One day I'm going to be the wealthiest guy on the council estate. Yeah? Imagine if somebody said, I'll be the wealthiest guy in the council estate. You know what you say to the guy? Sugar. You don't be the wealthiest guy in the council estate. If you want to be rich, don't look around and say, this is a council estate where everybody is earning minimum wage, which is about nearly £9. One day I'll be earning £12 an hour. I'll be bigger than everybody else over here. No, one day I want to be earning 150, 200, 300 pounds an hour. And I want to live in a big detached house. And I want to have a big car. And I want to have a pool in the back. And I want to live in Kent or down in Cornwall and not have to live over here in this horrible, whatever it is. When people dream, they don't dream tiny. You dream big. And you don't look only at your immediate surroundings and try to figure out, well, according to my immediate surroundings, the highest salary in this entire council estate is 20 grand. If I make 25, I'm the richest man around. Yeah, but at 25,000 pounds, you're not making a fortune of money. That's not a great way of sort of looking to grow. Yes, it's great if you'd make more money than all your peers. That's wonderful. But most people, their dream is not just to somehow outperform their peers. Their dream is to be great. In all ways. I want to make a lot of money. I want to be a millionaire. That's what most people will tell you. Nowadays already people don't even talk millionaires, they talk billionaires. I want to be a billionaire when I grow up. Nobody says, I don't want 10 million. What's 10 million? 10 million is a fortune of money. No, I don't want 10 million. What's 10 million? I want a lot of money. Okay. So when it comes to Gashmis, when it comes to looking at our physical needs, we always go above and beyond, way, way, way past just our immediate surroundings. I don't only want to be driving the newest Estima on the road. My Estima is going to be a 10 reg or an 11 reg. It's not only going to be an 03 or 53 or 54 like everybody else. You don't dream. So that's your dream? Your dream is, I'm going to have a big loft with 2 extra bedrooms and a bathroom. Yeah, dream big. And most people do dream big. And the answer is that you don't only dream big. The truth is you shouldn't only dream big when you're dealing with Gashmias, when you're dealing with physicality. Dream big in Ruchnius. Dream big in your spiritual life as well. Right? So if somebody says, one day I'll come to shul once a week. Right? Most of my friends don't come to shul once a week, and I come to shul once a week. Yeah, that's better than everybody else. It's better than your peers. Is it big? Well, no, but that's where the extent of my dreams is. I will come to shul every Shabbos morning. Lots of my friends don't come to shul every Shabbos morning, and I will come every Shabbos morning. That's great. I'm not talking down on that, but dream big. Maybe I come to shul once a day. Maybe I come to shul 3 times a day, or in our shul twice a day. Because, we have Mincha Ma'ariv together. Sorry, that's the only reason I'm saying twice. Dream bigger than that. I'm going to give to charity. One day I'll be able to give £1,000 to charity a year. No, and one day hopefully I'll be able to give £10,000, £100,000 to charity a year. What a wonderful thing it would be if I could give £100,000 to charity a year. First of all, because it means I'm making £1 million, but that's besides the point. But how wonderful would it be if you could? I'm thinking big as well. Well, $1 million's not big, right? A lot of people, $1 million's not even big. Yeah. But let's say, you dream. I dream that one day I'll be able to be somebody gives charity, and I'd like to support a charity to the tune of £1,000 a year. £1,000 is beautiful. But why dream small? Dream big. I'd like to give £10,000, £100,000 to charity, £250,000 to charity. How wonderful would it be if I could give that kind of money to charity? Don't stop in the middle. You don't dream to make £1,000 on your salary. Why do you dream to give £1,000 to charity? Bigger and better. Looking at other people that do more than you, not just the people in your immediate surroundings. So sometimes people get stuck in their immediate surroundings and look around and say, most people that I'm with are not that religious, and I'm more religious than most of my peers, and therefore I'm really good. And the answer is, you're better than everybody else. But there's always further to go. And instead of looking at your surroundings that are keeping you back, that are holding you back, that are not as great as they could be, and saying, I am better than everyone else around me, and therefore I am great, look at the people who are really great and say, no, but there are people much greater. And I'm pining to be like them. Not I'm pining to be like the people that are mediocre. Don't dream. If you dream mediocre, then you'll be mediocre. If you dream big, then you have a chance of being somewhat big. And sometimes you get very big. But if you look at the people around you that are mediocre and say to yourself, they're mediocre and I'm a little bit better than mediocre, so I'm better than them, so I'm the best around. That's not where you want to be. That's the Rosh L'Shualim. That's the head of the foxes. The fox is further down the pecking order. But yeah, I'm the head of the foxes, and therefore. And that's what Rabbi Yochanan tells us, as Rashi is teaching us. B'derosov means Noach can't only look at his generation and say, everybody's evil and I'm not as evil as everybody else, and therefore I'm a good guy. You're better than everybody else around. But think big. Say, I want to be more than that. I don't just want to be better than the bad people. I'm the best inmate. In jail, I was the nicest inmate. I've never been to jail, but, in jail, I was the nicest inmate. That's not saying much, because you're still in jail. You want to say, I'm the best one around, or whatever it is. And looking big, and thinking big, and dreaming big. That's what you need to do. Okay, so we're going to leave it at that. Thank you very much for all of you who joined me on Zoom. I hope that it wasn't intermittent, the connection over here on the Zoom, because it looked like I was having a bit of an issue with the reception. Thank you for those of you who joined us on Facebook. Thank you to those on Torah Anytime as well. If you want to get in touch, davideisenberg@gmail.com. Look forward to seeing you all next week. Next week, please God, we go back to the normal time of 10 past 8, quarter past 8, because Myra will be at 7:45. So then we go back to the normal time. So I look forward to seeing you hopefully all next week at the regular time. Have a good night.
Good night.